First of all, welcome, and we thank you for your presence here, and we enjoy the fact that you continue to show your love, care, concern, and support to the station, and of course, we welcome you as welcoming our guest on today, author Mr. Bill McBean is here with us, and of course, I'm Pastor Kevin, and I'm always feeling good, and the music that I play is always a blessing. But in the meantime, I want to do this focus on Bill and invite him to share what it is that's on his heart with each and every one of you. Before I get started, Bill, I want you to do me a favor if you don't mind. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from. Who is Bill McBean?
I am an author from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm 75 years old. I am a veteran newspaper guy. Have worked for the Denver Post and several other newspapers in New York and Arizona and Colorado. And I have dedicated my life to trying to find the truth about things, including the truth about myself.
Wow. You know, a lot of people, you're 75 years old and you're saying you're trying to find out the truth about yourself. Wow. And let me
It's a lifelong quest,
there you
Pastor
go.
Kevin.
There you go. And you know what? Let me say this. You look great to be 75 years old, man. I tell you, man.
What I love to hear.
Oh my! I want to look
Love
like
hearing.
you when I grow up. I'm just, my goodness. Well, we are here, and you are being presented as our special guest on today, and of course, you are an author, trauma family. You know what? I want to break that down before we really get into detail, and just have you come on and just give us a little overall view, a little history on this particular publication.
Sure. Um, I I wrote the book as an effort to understand myself, and um, that's the best reason to write a memoir. And memoir is about my family and how I grew up with a father who was a veteran of World War II. He was in an artillery company in France and Germany, and he came home with PTSD, uh, post-traumatic stress disorder. And he was a good guy, and he was a hard-working person. He became a lawyer in spite of his problems with alcohol and with PTSD. And but it was not easy growing up there because he was, um, you know, not always himself, and he delivered very mixed messages about
Mm,
right and wrong,
right.
um, and so as a result, I got into my teen years as one mixed up person, and um, once you start off that way,
Right.
you
Right.
tend to take curves too fast, which is what I persisted in doing.
Right. Wow. Well, I'm listening to you, and I heard you use the phrase or the letters or the term, however people receive it, PTSD.
Right.
And really and truly, a lot of people, they may hear it from time to time, and
Hmm.
they've heard people say it, and they act like they know what it really means. But do me a favor, break that thing down for us. What is PTSD?
Well, I'm happy to do that, and it's not confined to people who have war experiences. It's um, anybody can suffer it if you've, for instance, been in an auto wreck. Sometimes that causes it. If you've been through, if you've been a victim of crime, that certainly can cause it. But war is basically what I wrote my book about, and because we have so many people coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq and various other war zones who, are just really, really suffering. And so, according to the American Psychological Association, that uses a book called the DSM-5 to determine all of this, PTSD is persistent, disordered cognitions about the cause or consequences of traumatic events. So, in other words, distorted thinking about causes or consequences of traumatic events. In other words, war or whatever it was. And that leads people to blame themselves or others for their persistent negative emotional state, like fear, anger, guilt, or shame. And a lot of these folks have little or no interest in participation in various activities or in any kind of social life.
Right. Wow. Well, and I heard you. I heard you use to inform us of your father coming back, World War II. Basically receiving this PTSD syndrome, I'll call it, status. And I'm wondering to myself, Bill, I'm sitting here saying, why didn't his father try to seek some sort of guidance, some sort of help when he came back from World War II with PTSD? So I'm going to ask you that question. Why didn't your father seek help when he came back from World War II with PTSD?
Well, in those days, if you admitted that you were, quote, shell-shocked, end quote, and that was the most obvious term for it in those days in 1946, if you admitted you were shell-shocked, then it was very likely that you couldn't be a professional. Like a bar association would not admit you if you said you were in any way battle fatigued or shell-shocked. And people would just totally lose confidence in what you were doing. My dad could have gone to Alcoholics Anonymous, but he chose not to because he was a proud guy. And I think one very significant issue with military men is they don't want to admit that battle has had a significant effect on their personality. And because they're tough. They're tough guys.
I've seen that happen. I've seen that. I witnessed that happen to many people, and it doesn't have to be involved in war. I mean, a lot of times a guy would step up and he would just want to put himself in a classification of being, mentally strong, or his ego would kick in and say he's tough, and he would really hate to admit that he's going through some sort of negative defeat. And PTSD, that's what that reminds me of. Now, I've been talking to you for a little while, Bill, and I've heard you use the phrase transgenerational transmission of trauma. And a lot of people don't really, they can't embrace it, or they don't understand what that really means. And I want you to tell our viewers and our listeners, what does that mean when you use that term, transgenerational transmission of trauma?
Well, the concept was first explored in the 1960s, I believe, and it was experiments done with survivors of Auschwitz and their children. So people who went through, obviously had kids when they got out of the camps sometimes, and so the study was of those kids, and those children exhibited the same kind of standoffish um, behavior, clannish behavior, suspicious behavior, unwilling to participate, that kind of thing. I know of somebody, a friend in Denver, who would always keep her passport on the underside of a table, the kitchen table. So it was pasted under there so they could just grab it and run when the occasion came.
Right, right.
And so she was deeply scarred by her parents' flight from German occupied territory, and so that's how the whole thing got started.
Right, right.
But it's also come to mean the psychological damage done to your children when you have PTSD.
Right.
So that's where I come in. So it's the transmission from one generation to another of an emotional state.
Right. Well, now, as I look at rewinding the tape, so to speak, and pressing play, looking at your father coming back from World War II and having PTSD, is that what particularly motivated you to write this particular book, or is there something additional that you can add to that did that motivation, that was a part of that motivation? What motivated you to write your current publication?
Well, what motivated me was um, a big desire to tell my story because I thought it was unique. And when I started writing, I went to a memoir class first, and to learn how to write a memoir. And the teacher suggested that I write down 20 anecdotes that symbolized what I thought the book was going to be about,
Right.
and then write out those anecdotes, and then figure out what the book was actually about. And it turns out, I thought the book was going to be one big long screech about what a terrible childhood I had, but I came to realize I didn't really have that bad a childhood because so many people have had so much worse. But
Right.
What I discovered was that secondary trauma, as it's called, had turned me into a kind of selfish, narcissistic idiot that just kind of thought only about himself and thought his issues were the biggest problem ever. And of course, as I say in the book, I slipped into alcoholism just like my dad, and spent much of my middle years, my 30s and my 40s, trying to recover from it. Now I haven't had a drink in a long time now, but that doesn't mean that I didn't leave a lot of wreckage along the way. And so that means that to a degree, my children were traumatized.
Right. Right.
I've had two children, and both of them show the marks of what happened to me at the hands of my father. So war has consequences that go on for generations and generations and generations.
Wow. And I am in total agreement with you. And of course, we take time out to give our public service announcement. Welcome to the program, and thank you all our listeners for joining us today. Our guest today is author Bill Mcbean, and he's a great person and author that has publicized and put his mind and his heart into this publication. And of course, we encourage all of you to show your love, care, concern, and support by sharing with your followers, your family, your friends, even making a purchase of this great publication. Put it in your bookstore, share it with all of your family, send copies to them, tell them and encourage them that this is a book that you definitely want to have in your presence and in your archives. Now, how many chapters are in this particular book? I just thought I'd ask that question because now you're giving me something to think about, and
Yeah.
what it is. What it is I'm sure that every chapter has a special meaning. Is it chapter based or is it just one full written out publication?
Well, it's chapter based, and um, I recollect that there are 30 chapters,
Wow.
maybe one or two more, and the some of the chapters are just to share recommendations from experts about what you should do if you're in the kind of situation that I was in,
Right.
and um, and those recommendations include, if you know a vet's coming home, make preparations and make a plan for how you're going to deal with a guy who probably has PTSD, because 20% of all the troops that fought in Iraq and Afghanistan came home with PTSD,
Right.
and that's 2 million people, and so that's a lot of folks, obviously, who are going to have a lot of children, and only a very small fraction of those people are getting the help that they need,
Right.
and the help that they need has to begin at home. And unfortunately, it falls on the spouse of the soldier who returns to take that in hand, because an awful lot of soldiers still think that alcohol is the medicine that they need
Right.
to
Right.
to take care of their problems,
Right.
and it makes it so much worse that there's just no describing it.
Well, as time winds down, I want to make sure that I share this with all of our listeners. I encourage you all to visit the GMAP Broadcast Network website at www.gmap1.com. And you can visit the area that is titled Featured Authors. Featured Authors. You will see a cover of Bill's cover of the publication in that area. We encourage you to click on that cover. It will take you to the necessary location to find out more about the author as well as the publication, how you can purchase, how you can reach out to Bill and maybe intimately talk to him more in detail about some of the things that he's been through or some of the resources that he might have. I already have a plan to where I would love to invite Bill back on a more consistent basis, uh, and just talk to him about the different chapters, because I think every chapter in this publication has a meaning. But we'll get to that at some point, I'm sure. But at the same time, I want to thank Bill for being here. And before I let you go, Bill, I just want to know, do you have or can you share any advice for military spouses or family members or partners that are dealing with someone who has had this I guess you can call it syndrome, PTSD? Do you have any advice for a military spouse in this faith?
Well, yeah, it all starts with whether or not the military person is willing to get help. If
Ah,
that person is not willing to get help, then probably all bets are off, because you can lead a horse to water, as they say. But if the veteran doesn't want help, then you have to tend, it's your responsibility as a spouse to make sure that your kids get help. And so line up through the Veterans Administration and Veterans Services a psychologist to talk to you and to your kids about next steps for dealing with a crisis that you're going to have. I mean, this is not something that can be averted or in any way dodged. It's just gonna it's gonna be with you until you take steps to make things change.
Right. Well, I'm certainly going to speak for quite a few people that we truly appreciate you being here with us on today, sharing what you have shared with all of our listeners. And of course, we, like I said before, we'll look forward to inviting you back soon. We thank you so much for just being willing to step up and step out on faith and provide this publication to not just us here, but to everyone around the world. And we want you to continue to do what you're doing, and that's spreading this information and/or resources to as many people as possible. PTSD is no joke. PTSD is something that you must grab a hold of as soon as you can. And of course, we send our prayers out to those military spouses specifically that they're dealing with a partner who has PTSD. It's not a joke. It's something that you must address as soon as you can to try to get things back to normal as soon or as quickly as possible. We pray for them, and we of course want to continue to let them know that there is resources out there that can assist them during this trying time and along their journey. So, Bill, we thank you so much for being here with us today. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Until then, we want you to continue to have a wonderful, wonderful day. Be blessed, and of course, be a blessing to others, okay?
Thank you very much, Pastor Kevin.
We thank you for being here with us today.